1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 to 8. Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth. On the next Sunday before the season called Lent, which is the season of conversion to God, as will be found explained in the sermon for Ash Wednesday, and indeed the season of religious strictness generally, the grace of charity or love is specially brought before us. It is thereby clearly implied that this most excellent gift is indispensably necessary to all who would attain or exhibit any other of the Christian graces. Self-denial is worthless without love. Almsgiving is nothing without love, and so of all the rest. The few words which have been already offered will have brought to mind the very remarkable chapter of St. Paul's first epistle to the Corinthians, which forms the epistle for the day and from which the text is taken. A more carefully drawn portrait of any Christian grace is not to be found in the whole volume of the New Testament. The notes whereby it may be recognized, or its absence discovered, are so numerous and so exact that there can be no possible mistake if a very little attention be given to the matter. Moreover, when it is considered that charity is declared to be the greatest of virtues, greater than hope, greater even than faith itself, no one who is at all desirous of pleasing God and anxious for his own safety can afford to overlook so very solemn and important a lesson. Let us therefore attend to this matter with some care. And first, we cannot help being struck by the very lofty place which the great apostle assigns to charity. If any one were to come among us and speak so eloquently that all paused to listen, while all who listened were enchanted, if the charm of his eloquence were such that tears flowed while he spoke, and men went away from his presence persuaded of the things he taught, we might be apt to think such an one a great favourite of heaven, as well as a chosen instrument in God's hands. St. Paul, however, speaking by the Spirit of God, expressly informs us that we might be mistaken in so doing. If this attractive speaker had not charity, he would be nothing. But we should be yet more certainly entrapped into a belief that we beheld a great and holy person, signally beloved of God, and destined certainly to occupy a high place in heaven, if the person we have been already describing had the gift of prophecy and understood all the mysteries of religion. The treasures of divine wisdom, we are apt to think, cannot abide with any but the very good. We learn from God himself, however, that they may exist where there is no charity, and moreover that if they do exist in one who has not charity, that man is nothing. A far severer trial would await us if we saw this person give proof of a most living faith? What would be thought of one who could say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and straightway it should be seen to obey the command of the speaker, and roll from its everlasting seat? We should surely regard him as something more than human. We should certainly be bold to assume that he carried the seal of the eternal God on his forehead. And yet the witness of the Spirit is express that this worker of miracles, if he were without charity, would be as nothing in God's sight. The crowning wonder yet remains. Watch this same speaker with the tongue of angels. This same mighty prophet and deep divine, this same worker of miracles, who is possessed of all faith, watch him as he retires from the scene of his preaching, of his display of sacred wisdom, of his acts of miraculous power, and behold him calmly making a sacrifice of all his earthly possessions, in order to benefit the poor, to clothe the naked, and to feed the hungry. He is now himself a beggar. He has parted with all his goods, and the objects of his bounty were the poor of the flock, the good shepherd's little ones. You must feel that this sight would completely silence suspicion and overcome doubt. We should be tempted, every one of us, to exclaim, This man is a real saint. However, the plain fact is that if I do all these things and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. This may appear strange, but the strangeness of the matter signifies nothing. It is true. There may be the gift of tongues without the gift of charity, the gift of prophecy, the understanding of all mysteries, and the possession of all knowledge, yet no charity. Faith that can move mountains, yet no charity. Almsgiving, which is sometimes improperly called charity, and yet charity itself may be wanting. And, which it concerns us most of all to notice, if it be wanting, then all the other wondrous gifts and graces are nothing worth. A more striking revelation concerning ourselves is perhaps hardly to be found in any page of Scripture. What then is the nature of the gift, concerning which such lofty things are told us? Verily, when we come to examine, our wonder increases. We expected something very magnificent, and everything we hear is something exceedingly lowly. We expected a proud flower, and we find nothing but a fragrant herb which creeps very near the ground. Let us go over St. Paul's description of charity feature by feature. It will not take us long, and we cannot possibly occupy ourselves more profitably. First, then, charity suffereth long and is kind. Observe, therefore, that charity does not do anything great. Nay, it does not do anything at all. It suffers. It does not merely suffer, but it suffers long. Nor does it merely suffer long, but it is kind also. Next, we learn that it is without envy. Charity envieth not. It follows that it vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own. We may pause to point out that we are in the midst of a string of negatives, each of which demolishes at a blow a whole class of actions which disfigure the character. The boastful, the proud, the unseemly, the self-seeking, all of these here meet with their reproof, and are reminded that charity dwells with none of themselves. Charity, once more, is not easily provoked. And this is a feature of charity which reminds us plainly how rarely charity is met with in daily life, where, instead of unwillingness to take offence, we rather find people inventing causes of provocation where no offence was intended. Again, she thinketh no evil. O divine charity which thinketh no evil, even while she dwells in the midst of a wicked world. It is because she rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. If we loved better whatever things are pure and lovely and of good report, if iniquity were a burden to our spirits and a grief to our hearts, then doubtless we should be less prone to suspect its existence around us. Nay, we should think no evil where evil was not proved to be. Charity, lastly, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. And this lovely grace exhausts itself in no sudden act, but it becomes an abiding habit of the soul. Charity never faileth. Take notice then that endurance is again and again noted as its special work. Nay, faith and hope themselves are but two of its functions, and they are the only acts of charity which St. Paul here enumerates at all. This shall suffice on the subject of charity or love. The few words which have been already offered should set us on a curious and somewhat anxious review of our own conduct. And truly, he must be a very holy person indeed who can examine the Apostle's picture and not feel how very slender a likeness it presents of himself. Very certain are we that this page in the duty of a Christian man can never be too attentively studied, and that it is not by any means studied enough. The talk of what is called society is not the talk of charity. The ways of the world are not charitable ways. Public intercourse and private friendship are sadly marred by the absence of charity. Charity is sometimes a stranger even in domestic circles, and the happiness of a whole household becomes embittered for years, it may be forever. Why is this? How does it happen that what God hath so admirably contrived for the happiness and well-being of his creatures should become converted into a grief and vexation to them, as well as into an offence to himself? It is because there is so little long-suffering in the world, so little forbearance and kindness, so much envying, so many vaunting words and puffed-up ways, so much unseemly behaviour, so much self-seeking. It is because men and women are so very easily provoked and are so prone to think all evil of one another. It is because there is so little inclination to cover faults, so much unbelief, so little hope. It is because there is so small a measure of meek endurance amongst mankind.